Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. I think we'd all agree that there's a lot going on in the world right now. Inflation and economic tensions are an immediate concern for a lot of us. Food and other things are way more expensive than they should be. But if the economy continues to struggle, then even more serious consequences like civil unrest could occur. There's also a few different biological threats brewing right now, along with the ever-present potential for grid failures caused by weather events, cyber attacks, or some other more serious type of situation. And the best place to deal with nearly all of these is in your home. While I know that there's some folks out there just looking for an excuse to head for the hills, bugging out usually isn't a great idea. Your home can hold a lot more food and other supplies than a backpack will, and staying put should also give you a home field advantage. You know who belongs there, who doesn't, what's normal for your area, and there could even be resources nearby that you could use, like natural water sources. But even though it's usually the safer option, there are still several threats that you could face while you're bugging in. Understanding what those are and how to plan for them will give you the best chance of making it out of a bad situation alive. And the first thing that could royally mess up your bug-in plan is if your home got hit by a storm or some other natural disaster. And one of the best ways that you can prepare for those is to just know what natural disasters are the most common in your area. For example, where I live, we don't really have to worry about hurricanes and blizzards, but we do have some pretty severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, especially in the spring, which we're heading into now. And also be aware of the 50 or 100 year things. Like maybe your area isn't too prone to flooding, but it happens every once in a while. Be aware of that. If you live in an area near that has wildfires, know about that. If you live on a coast, expect hurricanes sooner or later. And even though there isn't a whole lot that you can do once those head your way, you can prepare your home to deal with them ahead of time. Like if you have trees that are hanging over your house, you can trim those. If you have a tree that's leaning dangerously, go ahead and get rid of it if you can. Then if you have any brush or undergrowth on your property, get rid of that to give a fire less fuel. Then also have ways to protect your preps or other belongings. A while back I did a video showing how that you could use Mylar bags and buckets to protect things like pictures and documents. You can also elevate furniture a little bit off the ground, just give it a better chance of making it through a flood okay. Then also have repair materials on hand, things like tarps, plywood, and also the tools that you would need to install them. And what that's going to do is that's going to help reduce the amount of damage that something like a busted window or a hole in your roof will do if it continues to rain, because I mean, it's already going to be bad. You just want to be able to make it less bad if at all possible. Then also consider having some backup shelter options. Every family should have a tent that's big enough to hold everybody in the family, but also try to work out something with like a neighbor, family member, or a friend that's nearby so that if something happens to your house, then you'll have somewhere safe that you can go. The next thing that can ruin your bug-in plan is other people, and when most folks think about this, they think of people close by. The best way to deal with threats from the people around you is to prevent them in the first place by exercising good OPSEC or operational security. Avoid bragging about your preps. If somebody already knows that you have stuff, then try to downplay it as much as possible. And then if there's already a situation going on, be aware of how you're using your preps. Light and noise discipline are very important. I talk about this a lot. If everybody in the neighborhood doesn't have power and your house is the only one with lights on, that's going to draw attention to you. Also, if there's a loud generator in your backyard, that's going to draw attention to you also. Then you can also improve the security of your home. Consider hardening entrances. There are those door reinforcement kits that you can install on your door that'll make it harder to kick in. There's also window film that you can put over your windows that make them less likely to shatter. But also consider having early warning systems like motion sensors, and then of course the low-tech method of dogs can work. Then you also want to have the skills and tools that you would need to defend your home. That's something that I talk about more on my other channel, DIY Prepper Reloaded, and if you want to learn more about that kind of stuff, then be sure to head over there. But it's also important to remember that it might not be people outside of your group that are causing issues. Threats can very easily come from within. It might be you or it might be a family member. Things like cabin fever, they are very real. If you're cooped up in your house forever and you're around the same folks day in and day out and you're doing the same stuff, then that's going to have an effect on people's psychology. You could start to have interpersonal conflict develop. Maybe you're just sick and tired of looking at one another. It could just be the stress of the situation also. If you're having to bug in or shelter in place, then there's a very good chance that something bad is happening on the outside, and different people handle that sort of stress in different ways, some a lot better or worse than others. A lot of people are going to have a desire for things to return to normal. Maybe they're a workaholic, they're really into their job, and they just don't know what to do with themselves when they can't go there day in and day out. So it's really important to have ways that you can keep yourself and everybody else occupied, but also maybe a little bit separate for at least short durations of time. Of course, you want to have games and other things that you can do together, but you also want to have some individual activities as well. Things like books that you can read, also puzzle books that people can work through. If you have kids, then coloring books are great for them. And then even picking up a toy that you can give to your kid at the beginning of that situation can make things just a little bit less stressful for them, because they might focus more on the new toy that they got rather than all the extra crazy stuff going on. Then you or somebody in your group could also deal with some sort of personal illness. It could be something like food poisoning, or maybe what they're having to eat just isn't agreeing with them. That's why it's important to acclimate you and your family to your food storage ahead of time, and also store what you would eat regularly. Don't store a bunch of stuff that nobody in your family's eaten before, because that's going to be bad all around. Also, think about what you had to go pick up from the store the last time that you or a loved one was sick. Maybe you didn't have enough like stomach medication. Maybe it was pain relievers, fever reducers, whatever the case is. Think back on those situations, and also take a look in your medicine cabinet to be sure that you have all the over-the-counter medications that you and your loved ones normally use, and also other things like first aid equipment, band-aids, antiseptics, things like that. Then another thing that could wreck your bug-in plan is if the situation lasts longer than what you're expecting. Probably one of the biggest issues with that is going to be running out of food or water. A lot of people, they have sort of a set idea of how long a situation could last, and they might plan for just enough food and water for that particular time frame, and that's not really the best thing to do, because a lot of times we use more food and water than what we think that we will, especially if other family members, especially kids, are involved. And a good way to head all of that off is to just store more food than what you think that you'll need. And a good way to go about doing that is to focus on your low cost options, things like canned goods, beans, rice, stuff like that, because you're going to be able to store a whole lot of those for the same money than you would more expensive things like your freeze-dried food. Also have ways to collect additional water as time goes on. Water's going to probably be the biggest thing that you use more than what you think that you're going to, because when people set water aside, they mainly think of drinking, but you're going to need water for washing hands. If you have pets, they're going to need water also. Then consider starting a garden so you can have a renewable food supply. And yeah, I know that those take a while to get started. It's not something you just snap your fingers and it's there. So it's best to get started now. I did a video last week over that. Then another thing that people will probably run out of is fuel. And that's especially true if you're using the same fuel type for multiple devices. Me, for example, my generator can run on propane, and since it has such a long shelf life, that's what I tend to store for it. But I also use propane for camp stoves and heaters as well, and if we're dealing with a winter power outage, then it might be sort of a bad situation if you're using propane for both your generator and your heater. It might not go as far as you're expecting it to. So be sure to have all the fuel types that you'll need. That's gasoline, propane, butane if you have one of those. And also, if you're planning on using something like a wood stove or a rocket stove, be sure to have some wood set aside for those. Another thing that could ruin your bug-in plan is equipment failure, and generators are probably going to be one of the biggest culprits of that, because a lot of us, we get a generator, we set it in our garage, and maybe we don't start it up as often as we should. Then we go to use it, and then the gas is bad, or the spark plug's no good, we haven't changed oil in it, all those kinds of things. So be sure that you're keeping up with your essential maintenance on your more vital pieces of equipment. But then also other things like your lights could break. I had an LED lantern that the switch just went bad on it, and that shouldn't happen. They have like almost no moving parts, just that one tiny little thing messed up. So it's good to have backups. Then also weather could damage things like your rainwater harvesting system. I know most of us are coming out of winter now, except for my friends in the southern hemisphere. You're just getting started with fall, but things like your water barrels, they could freeze when temperatures get really low, and if they're full of water, then those barrels could crack. Also, other like pipes and stuff that are connected to them could get damaged. So consider having repair supplies for those on hand as well. Then another thing that could wreck your bug-in plan that doesn't get nearly as much attention as it should is not having a sanitation plan. Poor sanitation is going to cause big problems for a lot of people. You need to know what you're going to do with your trash. What are you going to do with your human waste, solid and otherwise? Having a camp toilet can help you deal with the human waste side of things, and also have some trash bags and maybe even some kitty litter to go with that as well. If you don't have a camp toilet, then you can make sort of a field expedient version of that using a 5-gallon bucket and a pool noodle. But with either one of those, you do want to use like a heavy-duty trash bag as your liner. Also get some wet wipes and some sanitizing wipes for cleaning off yourself and surfaces around your home. And in addition to helping you clean, they're also nice because they help you save water since they're already wet. You're not going to have to use any of your stored water to spray anything down. Just wipe things off and you're done. Then also have plenty of pesticides. If we're dealing with a situation where the trash isn't running or the power's been out for a while, then things like rodents, roaches, mosquitoes, and other things, their populations are probably going to skyrocket, and you want to be able to deal with them so that they don't get out of hand. But one of the most catastrophic things that could ruin your bug-in plan is a house fire. During power outages, and especially long-term situations, house fires skyrocket because people are using things like heaters, camp stoves, candles, oil lamps, stuff that they're really not used to using. Then there can also be things like power surges and power lines that can cause fires as well. So you want to have things like fire extinguishers and fire blankets on hand so that if there is a fire, then you can deal with it quickly and hopefully prevent it from spreading. Another thing that could ruin your bug-in plan, but it's actually pretty easy to deal with, is poor organization. Say there's a power outage. You don't want to have to spend 15 minutes trying to find a flashlight or like an LED lantern. You want to know right where those things are so you can get to them easily. Also, if you have a generator, you don't want it buried underneath a ton of stuff, because then if you need it, you're going to have to dig it out before you can use it, and that's not good. Also, you want to avoid having your house cluttered with a bunch of unnecessary junk. That's one thing that me and my family, we've been dealing with a lot for a while. We have a 5-year-old, we both have our own businesses, and I mean, it's kind of, it has been sort of a challenge. That's something that we're working on slowly but surely. Now, if you want to see ways that you can keep your preps and other survival gear a lot more organized, then click here. Or if you want to see my video that covers more of what you would need to bug in effectively, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.